Hello and welcome to my second project. We're going to be looking at some code I wrote to find the sums of squares. We'll start with the purpose of the code itself, and what it does, and then what part I found to be the hardest. Now the purpose of the code is rather simple. We want to find all the sums of two squares between 0 and a user input. Then we want to give a percentage of the total integers between 0 and input, which are the sums of squares. We do this by running a function. In this case, I named the function sums of squares. All up here is just little splash text, prompting the user to input that number. The function begins by asking the user to make an input. It then defines a set which we'll be using to hold all of those squares. We'll call this numbers. Then we start with a nested for loop. It begins by determining our x value. It starts at 0 and then it runs to our user input. We use an if to make sure that that square is already too big for n. If it's less than, it continues. We move on to our y, where it'll range from x to n. We'll say that if that sum of squares is less than n, we'll define y as the sum of squares. If not, we don't have to worry about it. And if y is already not in the set, then we'll add it. This makes sure that we have no duplicates. And this will run continuously until we have all of our values. We'll then sort the numbers numerically. We'll print out that set. And then we'll calculate our percentage by asking what is the length of the set, and we'll divide that by that user input. Then we'll repeat our function. It asks for the user input again. It clears the set. That way it has a fresh start. Now actually running the code. We prompt our user. Let's say 10 start out. It spits out that code, that set, and then it spits out the percentage. Let's try 100. As we can see, it is ordered numerically, and then it also gives out a percentage. But now let's try something less than what we had before. So let's try 5. And we see because we defined it as a new set, we don't have all of this added to it. Now, let's enable that comment and see what happens. All we're going to do is we're going to say x squared plus y squared is equal to that sum. It's going to show us exactly what it's calculating every time it runs. We see those start x squares. These are our beginning of the for loop. Then it moves into the 1 and then 4. So that's 0, 1, and 2 squared. And then these are going to be all our y values. So as you can see, for one time that the x runs, the x for loop runs, we have 4 times that the y for loop is running. Now the hardest part of the code was making sure that the code wasn't doing more calculations than it needed to. For instance, like 10, it made little difference, but when you try things like 100,000, it takes a lot more time for the code to actually run because of the amount of calculations necessary. So, in using those for loops and making sure we use if statements, it makes sure that we're not doing any more calculations that are necessary. So, instead of going all the way through 0 for every single square, we're just doing the amount that we need. And then we'll do 1 and then 4. Thank you so much for watching. Have a wonderful day.